Hi everyone, you're listening to the Vialucci podcast, uncensored and completely unedited discussions about life and everything in it. We hope you enjoy the show.
Oh, Tim Harkness, how are you?
Oh, very good.
Actually, before we start, let's just drink from the sponsor. Really thirsty.
Noble water. Refreshing.
Well, if you're going to do it, you might as well just do it properly. There you go. Tim, I've spelled your name right, and that's right. It's H-A-R-K, isn't it?
That is correct.
Harkness. Whenever I hear a surname for the first time, I always wonder where it comes from. Have you looked into the...
Yes.
Anything
of Scottish origin.
Oh, really?
Scottish border on the west side of the country, originally.
Okay.
And how like, have you got a grandmother that's Scottish or a parent that's Scottish? How close is it?
Well, the Scottish line is a little further away, but my father was born in Manchester, and my father's family are from Manchester.
Oh, okay.
Quite a long way back.
Okay.
And you were born in South Africa?
I was born in South Africa, yes.
I was going to say I detected a little accent.
Oh, yes. Well, I was in
It's not
South Africa
Birmingham
recently, and I passed for South African. In that I was able to get into South African tourist attractions as a South African and pay a reduced rate.
Yes. And is that legal? It doesn't like
a South African accent.
Accent test, you check.
Yes,
yeah, they got like a little colour chart.
Yeah, South African.
Easy.
I meant like a
right.
chart for the accent.
Oh, God. It's okay.
Read these words.
Yeah,
It's early. It's early, okay. It's not, but I've got no excuses. I'm sorry.
But before we get going, so we've had a discussion. So your role with Chelsea, what was the actual role?
So my job title is Head of Sports Science and Psychology.
At Chelsea Football Club, is that?
That is correct. Yes.
Right, so, but we did say you're under an NDA, so you can't really talk about anything. So instead of darting around the subject, well, to be honest, I don't know anything about football, so you're lucky.
Great.
Do you like football?
Yes.
What team you go for?
I support Reading. So
Reading FC, is that the thing?
Yes, Reading FC.
How good are
they? They stayed up. They avoided relegation yesterday, even though they lost 3-0 away to Hull City. Not the finest result, but yes, staying in the Championship another season.
I thought, don't each team have their own soccer ground?
They have a stadium, yes.
But Chelsea's not that big. Where do they play?
They play in they're kind of near Fulham actually. Like that's the.
But they're actually in Fulham.
Yeah, that's the thing is that that it's really close to Fulham.
It was originally a dog racing track.
Oh,
it started off as a dog racing track. Okay. Had a capacity of over 100,000.
Oh, okay.
And they
for the dog racing.
Yes. No, dog racing used to be the biggest.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that big though.
No, it was massive. Yeah.
I used to work at a nightclub under a dog track. Oh, I can't say anything. Can't tell you any of my background. Anyway,
can't guess where it was.
It was in Walthamstow. The dog track there. There used to be I think it was called Chimes or something, but it was where everyone went. Staff and punters who couldn't get in anywhere else. So if you lost your job, so you'd go, and I can't really say any more than that. Brilliant. Dingy it was. It's like a cave. It's like it's all awful atmosphere. Anyway, so getting back.
Anyway, back on track.
Yeah. So we can't really talk about the football thing, but so
which is obviously there's a lot going on there, but yes, we will bypass that.
Yeah. So are Chelsea doing all right? I suppose you might say.
Yeah, well, they're third in the league.
Okay. Is Manchester still the big thing?
Manchester City now.
No, what do you mean? Not Manchester United?
No, Manchester City.
There's no Manchester United anymore.
Well, there is Manchester United, but I mean, they're sort of badly underperforming.
Oh, really? I thought they were the big...
They are, but they spend an awful lot of money, have a very decent squad on paper, have gone through managers every 6 months here and there. And massively underperforming really for what they are.
Oh, okay. Right, that's football done. I've exhausted anything I've got. Yeah. So you're an author of the book 10 what's it? My dyslexia is kicking in. The 10 Rules for Talking.
That's it. Yeah.
I had guide in my head. I couldn't get it out.
I'd say we have the author. We can ask.
No, I had to fight through it. When was it? 2020 it came out originally.
Yeah.
So you sort of just got in there just in time.
Well, just kind of at the wrong time to be quite honest. just before the pandemic started and lockdown started. So from a publishing point of view, it wasn't great.
Right, yeah, okay.
But
in terms of friction in society.
Yeah, yes. Well, we were a little worried, actually, because, when I was writing the book, it was Donald Trump and Brexit that were two of these.
Yeah.
And I was almost thinking, well, what happens when that's all over? But, I shouldn't have worried. There's
plenty of ammunition.
plenty more disasters to come. Things can get worse.
Yeah. Oh, don't underestimate that, mate. And it's still not over.
No, that's what I'm joking. I was saying, isn't it dreadful? We just come out COVID, we had the war, and I was just like, what next? And I was like, oh, don't you worry. Next year's going to be, and I was like, don't you worry. I was like, next year.
Yeah.
Do you remember that year when all those celebrities were dying? And everybody's thinking what a terrible year that was because celebrities were dying.
So, well, it sounds, it was like when I first saw a book on breathing and I went, well, I've done all right so far. And then I read it and I went, oh, actually, I didn't know anything. So it's just, no, I mean, and even now, I remember thinking back, there's no way. What do I need a book on breathing for? And then you go, oh, right. Because you don't know anything, so you assume everything's fine.
Yeah.
So talking, again, another thing, you go, well, I'm all right, I know how to talk.
Yes.
But there's a lot going on, actually, when you look into talking. I was talking to somebody the other day, actually, and we were talking, he's dyslexic, and we was talking about dyslexia, and he'd actually been through the rigmarole of speaking to the experts and blah, 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 and going through it and testing and retesting and all that. And he said some interesting things, and he was saying how they converse differently because they actually talk in stories and pictures in their head as they're speaking, rather than bang, 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 bang. They tend to speak more in long form, sort of like as I'm doing now.
Yes.
So I thought, that's interesting because it's different brains speak.
So interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating.
What would I'm not going to go for 10 rules, but what would be the main point? Is it listening? Was that me just?
I think in a way, the main point is the point you were making about breathing, is that we all breathe and we're all good at breathing. But every now and again, there's an occasion when it would be useful to know a little bit more.
Yeah.
And, we're all good at talking. We can all talk and almost all of our conversations are successful. But there are occasionally times when it would be useful to be able to apply a little bit of strategy to it.
Yeah.
And breathing is something that we do automatically. We do it naturally, and we don't really think about it that much. But every now and again, it's useful to breathe in using a particular technique.
Yeah.
And I would say the same of talking.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody, I'm going about breathing, but I said, do you ever do that thing? I said, you'll be doing it, whatever, watching TV or whatever. And you suddenly think, I haven't taken a deep breath for about an hour. She went, oh God, I do that. Or she said, I was thinking, have I breathed in the last time? I don't remember breathing in. But this book was saying they to test their point, they bunged up their noses for like a month. And after that month, they started having respiratory problems after the 2 weeks, to the point where they had to stop doing it just because they covered the nose. But you think, they're sort of going and go, no, you don't realise how much is being cleaned. So they bunged up the nose, and after 2 weeks, they had to stop because they were having respiratory problems when they were asleep. In fact, somebody died, I think it was in America, where a woman, as a joke, bunged up her husband's nostrils and he suffocated in the sleep. Like he was obviously getting a lot more air through his thing, just passed out in his sleep. Anyway, it's breathing. So talking. So what's the biggest issue then? What is the biggest issue with people talking?
Well,
or conversing, I should say.
I think in a way there are two. So the one is this idea that a conversation has to be safe. And then the second, and I'll maybe try and say a little bit more about them, is a conversation has to be effective. So the idea of a safe conversation is the idea that people feel respected. And respect is a really interesting thing in human society and human culture, because success is actually fundamental to our, it's actually fundamental. We're social creatures. Belonging to a society is essential to our survival, and respect is essential to belonging to a society. So actually, while people might think, well, respect, it's a bit of a wishy-washy issue, as human beings, we experience it as something essential to our survival. And we take it very, very seriously. So when we feel that we're not being respected, it's something that requires immediate attention.
Yeah.
So in a conversation, it's extremely important that there is a sense of respect amongst people. And there's also a sense, something also that is essential to safety, is that we feel that that our agenda also is shared. So,
our agenda.
Yes. So, right now it's relatively easy, just as it's easy to breathe right now, it's relatively easy for us to have mutual respect. We haven't, come into any particular sense of conflict. We all seem basic level of competence and that kind of thing. And we also feel that we have a shared agenda here, which is to communicate and share ideas and share thoughts and hopefully have a good time. A little while ago, I was just feeling a tiny bit anxious, or we're going to be talking about football because that's not a shared agenda, and that would have edged the conversation into slightly out of safety. But that's the one requirement of a conversation, is that it's safe. And the funny thing is, when a conversation is safe, when we feel mutually respected and when we feel that our agendas are shared, we can actually talk about tough stuff. We could actually, criticize each other or raise quite sensitive issues, as long as we have that feeling of mutual respect and mutual purpose.
I hear this. I hear the phrase "good faith" used a lot in online discussions and online debates and political things. And this is constantly a term people often accuse of people of not arguing or discussing things in good faith.
Right.
In that they are not. They are often, that is the case of people talking past each other.
Yeah.
People
talking at someone,
not addressing the point, not having a discussion between one or two people or whatever, but having a discussion between you and the audience. So we're not having a discussion. We were having a debate about whatever, pick a topic.
Yeah.
Brexit.
Yeah.
And we're pinging points back and forth, but I'm not really engaging with your points. I'm sort of doing points and bigger points to a perceived audience behind you.
Right. Yeah. So you're doing a speech in effect.
Yes.
Regardless, it's not a tennis match. It's just me knocking the ball at you and hoping to knock you.
It's not a conversation. It no longer becomes a discussion or a conversation or a debate or whatever. It becomes you standing on a soapbox. Sort of.
And you've lost that mutual purpose. And there is. There's a classic hidden agenda there. That the agenda is not what is supposed to be agreed between the two of you in terms of trying to resolve something or trying to work something out. You're actually not trying to come to agreement in that conversation. You're just whistling to someone behind.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why typically I think a lot of online discussions and online debates don't necessarily work. They're not necessarily productive in that they produce any kind of coherent end product, to be honest.
They just immediately go downwards. It's just
because they are lecturing to lecturing to their own audience. They're lecturing a bit to the audience of possibly the person they're discussing with or whatever. And it is, they're 40-40-20 split. You possibly have 40% of people of the audience on your side, 40% on the other side. You maybe have 20% in the middle who are undecided, and you're possibly talking to those people. Yeah.
Well, I've said before, because I did security for a lot of time in nightclubs and things, and because I did it for so long, it warps your personality. So, and then you couldn't separate between daytime normal people and nighttime drunk people. So what would happen is, it took me years. Sorry, I'm not going to say anything. It took me years to unpick, which was a proactive thing I had to realize, to not batter people down verbally, whether it's in Tesco's or a nightclub.
Yeah.
And there was when I actively chose to move into a different world, I remember having to, as people started talking to me, having to actively think, listen, don't do because your brain's trying to go at them.
Yeah.
And I thought it's going to take forever, because it's like when I started talking to people, I'm in my head, I'm saying, right, listen, go, well, it's too much friction here. But then after about a year, it went away. And then I would listen more anyway. And I met a guy in America, and he's involved with business. And he said, anytime he has to deal with anything, if it's something to do with HR or investments or anything like that, he said, I actively say nothing. He said, I want them to want me to speak. He said, that whatever you got to say, so tell me about the thing, whatever, and just sit there until they got nothing. Let them. He said, I want to wait for them to want me to say something, because then it's like I'm inviting you in rather than a thing. Because I've noticed in conversations, like egos get involved, but it can happen so slight, but then really quick. Because if somebody else isn't more mature than you, they then back a little bit, and then you bite against that, and it just goes boom, 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 down. And I had heard of you spoke about ego before, the thing of ego getting involved in the way. And I think it's an underplayed thing. Like, we are apes, and we don't know that we don't know when friction comes up. Yeah. You always need that one person that's much more mature to stop. Because I know people that you think, talk to him not. Why are you talking rude? Because if somebody talk to you like that, that'll end up in a fight. You're relying on people being nicer than you to let you get away with the way you talk to people. Yeah. But yeah, ego in conversations. Is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing is, which is interesting, is you saying you consciously change.
I had to do it. Yeah.
And that is a strategic element to a conversation. So, and one of the themes of the book is this notion that we can talk fast and we can talk slow. And it's borrowed from Daniel Kahneman's idea of thinking fast and slow. That as human beings, we've got this automatic, instinctive, reactive way of thinking, which is appropriate in some circumstances. And, in the work I do with sport, if you're a batsman, for example, and someone's bowling a cricket ball at you, you want to be using reactions and instinct. You don't want to be using anything else. But then what makes us different from animals is that we've also got this slow thinking where we're strategic and calculating and deliberate, and we're good at spotting errors. And so what you were doing is you were actually using that part of your thinking ability to say, okay, let's set this conversation in a particular way. And of course, as human beings, and it comes back to this notion of respect. And ego is a fascinating concept because many people who claim not to have an ego just have the luxury of not having their status threatened.
Yeah.
So I can kind of walk around all day and say, well, I've got no ego, but no one's coming up to me and challenging my status. Right, yeah. So lucky me, rather than me being a, totally well-rounded human being or whatever. And it's quite different for someone who's operating kind of on the fringes of whatever group he needs to get into and feels that status that he does have is potentially going to be threatened. It's much harder for that person to work without an ego.
Right, yeah.
Interesting. It's like virtue is no virtue unless tested. Yeah, ego is no ego unless tested. You know what I mean? So you can be a good person. I'm a good moral person, and I am, great this and that, and then
everything's comfortable.
It's very easy to do when things are going well, and you don't have to make these big decisions, or suddenly get put in a really difficult situation, and then that's when it's tested.
Yes. But to go back to your point, which resonated with me when you moved out of nightclubs, because I had a similar experience coming out of South Africa. Because South Africa, a high crime rate, and one of the things you start to do, particularly if you're the father of a family, is just about anybody you meet is assessed as a threat, as a physical threat. And this, takes up quite a lot of your attention. We're walking around in public. Every single person you walk past is assessed as a threat. They're watched very carefully to see any strange movements or risky kind of movements. And I had the same experience after I'd been in the UK a couple of years. I was actually standing at the bottom of a staircase of people who were getting off a train, and they'd walked over, those how the bridge goes over the railway line. They were all coming down, and I was standing at the bottom, and every single person who walked past me, I was assessing him as a threat. And I suddenly thought to myself, you don't have to do this anymore. and it was, it took some time, and it was this tremendous feeling of relief, because all of this energy that I was putting into, assessing risk, actually I could be spending on other things.
Yeah, it is weird. Sometimes I call it sort of background. It's like background radiation. I think some things like that. It's like background stress, and it's kind of always there in the background. Sometimes you have these things, and it's like having an ache in your knee or whatever, and it's always there, and it's always aching, and you just kind of get on with it, and you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And then one day the ache goes, and you go, oh,
why am I still limping?
No, you go, oh, I'm not. What's wrong? Oh, I'm not in pain anymore. Yeah. And you go, oh, that's strange. And you go, oh, I didn't realize how much of a thing that was, and how much it was kind of affected. Yeah, and even little things, little worries here and there, they add up. And I think that background stress is just there. And sometimes that just goes, and you go, oh, I didn't realize that was such a pressure on me.
And I think, to bring it back to ego, that we can sometimes perceive threats to our ego where they are not threats to our ego.
Yeah.
And it's that judgment that can be very liberating and can give us a sense of, so I don't actually have to defend my ego. I don't have to protect myself. and that can give you just headspace to, spend where you would choose. And that's...
Where were you from in South Africa?
I was from Durban.
So I'm surprised that because when did you say you came here 13 years ago?
That's correct.
And it was that big of it. There was that much crime that was actually inbuilt into your system. Yes. To really?
Well, the property, my mother had multiple break-ins in her house. I said to a friend recently, he was talking about a street fight here in England. And I said in England and South Africa, street fights are different things. Because in England, a street fight is, guys falling out of a pub.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of shouting, a lot of carrying on, a few fists.
That's not what it is. And in fact, the property that I lived in, we had 5 neighbors. We lived in that property for 4 years, and in the time of those 4 years, every single neighbor had an armed robbery in their house.
An armed robbery.
People coming into their house with guns.
Really?
To hold them up. So that was kind of the background.
And you'd been there from a young kid?
I was born in South Africa, yeah.
But I mean, you'd sort of known the crime like that, mainly.
Well, I mean, remember, as a South African, I had a bizarre upbringing in that I grew up under apartheid. So, apartheid, it's kind of hard to believe, even looking back. But, my mom actually put a bunch of our old cine family movies onto YouTube, and I was watching it, and I was thinking, you'd think we were living in Sweden. They're just all these little white kids with blonde hair running around, and you can't see a black kid anywhere. And that's how the system was designed. It was actually illegal to be friends with black people.
Yeah, because when you were talking about that before we started, I still think of that as 100 years ago. It doesn't seem right that you're sitting here talking about.
And so many times when I tell people, and this is why I actually like to tell the story, because this is living memory. This is, I was 18 when it all started to shift. It's 40% of my life I spent living in this legally racist country. Yes, and it's so recent, and it's a valuable experience for me because. The people that I grew up with, the white people who, tolerated, approved of, benefited from apartheid, were not different. They're just normal human beings.
Yeah.
And it shows the risk that normal human beings can end up tolerating or participating in really atrocious forms of society.
Yeah. I said people just can slot in very easily into these different societies.
It's a danger.
Yeah. I said I'd listened to the Will Smith autobiography which came out recently, and he
interesting.
It was just before
topical,
the thing.
Topical.
Well, I don't trust the media. When did the book come out? Was it around? No, it was before.
Well, do you think this is his book, part of his book tour?
I'm trying to think. Was it not going well?
Have I missed something here?
The thing is, you can't put nothing. I mean, I know so, but I don't put nothing past them. I don't put any. Anyway. But he talks about when they went to film Ali, and they went to film it in South. They filmed some stuff in South Africa, and it was weird because they wanted to use locals rather than ship all the Americans over because Ali film and all that sort of thing. And he said it was quite clear that a lot of people that were in the technical departments were come from white people, and a lot of people that were doing the low things were black people. And then something happened where there was. A young black boy that was working on the set had used the toilet and he'd urinated on the toilet rim, whatever you call it. And one of the white people had gone in afterwards, seen it, gone and grabbed the young black boy, dragged him back, then cleaned the toilet with his head. And this is on a film set.
Wow!
So all hell broke loose.
Now that is a scummy thing to do, but I mean, it isn't like let's be honest, lads. That's not the first time I've seen that. Using a public toilet, it's not great, but it's a thing that some dudes do. I don't know why.
But it was the reaction.
I think to get back at society for something. I don't know.
But the reaction of when obviously you think Will Smith bodyguard heard about it. He started having a go at this other bloke saying, "Try and make me do my head," and blah blah blah. Then Will Smith heard. Then the director came over and said, "What's going on?" And then it sort of split. Because I think the white people working on the film were unionised, and the blacks weren't, and blah blah blah. Anyway, so they said they said right, it started to get like it was going to get violent, like it was threats. So he pulled the main people in, and Will Smith was basically saying, like, who the F do you think you are? You're going to blah, 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 calling them all sorts of names. And the guy's defense was like, you Americans, you bandy about the word racism. You come over here, you don't really understand. I was thinking, you've wiped the guy's face on the toilet. What do you mean you don't understand the way things work over here? And he gave them the opportunity. So they said like, well, if one of us go, we're all leaving, and then your film's knackered. So then, and he said we would have been knackered because halfway through shooting and whatnot. And then he said it was weird because it was sort of I was thinking about Ali himself and what he faced, and what he thought, what would he do? And he said, no, the film's about Ali, and now this thing's popped up where I'm literally being given a choice of something horrendous happening, and what do I do? And he said that was the end of it. Yeah, he said no. He said, all right, do what you want to do. He said that him and the director used their own money to ship everyone over from America. He said, okay, we got along. I think there was like 21 or 22 people in the white sect. About 18 of them, I think, disappeared, and a few of them stayed. And then they took out their wages. They just shipped a load of people from America and put them up and did the film that way. So
they called their bluff then, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just like, all right then.
But he said it was the moment Ali suddenly popped into his head. I'm making a film about Muhammad Ali. Now this choice has come up. He said, yeah, of course. No matter what, you can't have a film with that hanging over it based on this. Yeah. And even then I was thinking, wow, like talking to you about like your experience, thinking, I thought that was documentaries no, it still goes on.
Yes, I mean, the fact that I grew up in a country where there were different public benches for white and black people, toilets, that kind of thing, it is bizarre. But also, it is a country that negotiated peacefully a handover of power.
Yeah.
And that is remarkable, and that is unique. Yeah. And one of the strange things about South Africa is that even though there was all of this legal separation between white and black people, all white people grew up with black people. And, partly because of economic inequality, you would have black people in your home. And a lot of white babies were carried by a black woman. And I think that in some ways, strangely, and it's wrong, it's wrong that people should be economically disadvantaged to the point where their labor can be used to care for children that are not their own.
Yeah.
But one of the strange effects of that is that there is actually this closeness that I think doesn't always exist in other countries. So I think white people and black people and Asian people in South Africa have in some ways lived closely together and do know each other and understand each other. And I think that's not always the case in other countries where some people have no experience of other cultures or other races. So we are a multicultural country, we're a multiracial country. And I think that is a strength for us.
And
that's part of how we did. Now, look, there's still a lot of problems, but it's part of how we did manage to.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Charles?
Well, I was going to say yes. That I do feel that some cultures are quite segregated. And that's more that is a part. I think it's a part of economic segregation, because I feel that there are some places. I look in some places. This is an outsider's perspective. But some places in America, I feel you could live and die in a suburb somewhere of a very big city, and never really mix with anyone who's not just basically a mirror image of yourself. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to be wealthy, middle class, comfortable with a profession, blah blah blah, and 2 kids, and nice house. And I do think that there is a bit more of a sort of less economic segregation, I think, in this country. I mean, there are areas where there are rich areas and there are poor areas, and there are areas where people don't necessarily mix. But I mean, I think our big cities are diverse, and I don't understand where. I don't know. I don't understand people getting funny about different groups, about people getting funny about gay people or whoever. Group X, because I'm just like, I don't know. Haven't you been on a bus? Like, haven't you had a job? You know what I mean? Like, they're just people. They're just there, and you just get to know them, and they're just doing their thing. They're just on the bus to work, and they're just doing the job, and they're coming back, and they're at the shop.
I listened to a comedian. What was it? I forgot her name now. But anyway, she grew up really poor. Like, I can't remember where it was in America. Like, really, like. Anyway, her story was, she said she up till 10 years old, she didn't know white people actually existed. She thought they were just in the TV until like she got older. She saw, I think it was a council worker or somebody came around who was white. She said, I had no idea because in their area, it was so impoverished. And it was out in the sticks where, you drive for miles, and even though they've got nothing, they've got these huge like wooden houses. She said, 10 years old, I didn't know white people. I thought they were just in the TV.
I had a girl tell me that once, and I got really... a couple of years
in England?
Yeah, in London.
What do you mean?
She's like, I haven't spoke to a white person for like 3 years. And I'm like... And I was like, I don't believe you. It's like, where do you live? I was like, where do you live?
Not in England.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I live in Hackney. And I'm like,
I was like, she's mental.
Sod off.
Yeah,
I was like, honestly, sod off. Like, there's plenty of white people there.
Right.
It's like, what have you not left your bedroom or something for 3 years? I was like, come on, man.
Right, let's get off the race topic.
Yeah.
I was just starting to bubble up in terms of
just get to the good stuff.
No, but and maybe we can come back to it. Because now we're actually starting to generate some heat in this conversation. That some of us are now, well, all of us have some opinions here that we're invested in. And suddenly this conversation is starting to become a little more complex because there may be some disagreement, and this disagreement is not trivial disagreement because it's touching on issues of identity, issues of value, issues of fairness, and issues of fact. So, it was beginning to emerge as an interesting, test case almost.
What, so your psychology, where did it all start? Like, what was you doing after school? What was your education?
So I initially did a BSc in biology. So that involved environmental biology. We participated in studies on elephants, actually, originally, and then I moved into psychology and studied baboons. That was my master's.
What was you studying in elephants? What was that? What was
well, elephants in South Africa at the time. The elephant breeding programs were going so well that some reserves were actually overpopulated with elephants.
Right.
And they needed to move those elephants, but the problem was that they didn't have the technology to move adult elephants.
Right.
So they would slaughter the adult elephants and move the baby elephants.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, absolutely. And this was now a new scenario because at the time people didn't realize how extremely social elephants are and how essential adult elephants are to the successful upbringing of baby elephants. So we were not looking at anything as dramatic as that. We were looking at the effect of the elephants on the vegetation. But what has happened subsequently is that those elephants many of them have grown up to be rogue elephants,
right,
and are doing things that elephants just normally wouldn't do,
right.
So because they haven't been brought up in that social structure.
Okay.
It seems strange that they wouldn't know that we're going to get rid of the parent. and
the kid will be fine. Yeah,
I mean, it's not sort of
just leave the orphan
1600s.
elephant. Yeah, I suppose lots of animals do that. Lots of animals, as soon as the kid as soon as the baby, whatever, like as soon as it gets able to just sort of potter about by itself, the mum goes, right, you're on your own. So
after we've shot your parents with a machine gun from a helicopter.
This isn't this not the 1600s. You can't say that doesn't work past 100 years ago. Anyway, so what happened then? You went into psychology.
That's correct. Yes.
Any specific psychology? Or?
Well, I was kind of, someone found out that I had one of my psychology professors found out that I had a background in biology, so he got me into studying baboons.
Oh, right,
yeah. So I spent some time studying baboons in the Drakensberg Mountains. And then, qualified as a counselor.
Hold on. That you skipped over that. What did you find out from the baboons? What do we not know about them that we...
So the baboons, it was brilliant. And I actually just recently saw a study which was doing something similar to what I did. But now they just put GPS collars on all the baboons and they can tell where they all are.
Cheating.
In my day, I had to follow them around,
really?
Which was really good fun. But what we were looking at is basically where they all positioned themselves in the troop.
Oh, right.
What you found in a game reserve where there were predators is that the males tended to occupy the periphery. The big males tended to occupy the periphery. And where I was studying them, it was a mountain range, but there weren't any big predators.
Right.
We wanted to see if they positioned themselves differently. And the theory that we came up with is that the males positioned themselves to show off. And
Yeah, shocking.
Are we talking about humans?
I know, it is.
Okay, so that's the
so that's all I've got from that.
Okay, right. We squeezed everything out of that one. Right, so on to next, and then human beings pop up now.
Yeah. So then I qualified as a counselling psychologist, and I can't remember how old I was.
Is this you in South Africa?
That's correct. Yes. And I was 26, 27.
Okay.
And who wants to see a 27-year-old psychologist?
Yeah.
Nobody. And in some ways, fair enough. So the practice was pretty quiet. And it was a bit stressful from a financial point of view. But I did have the opportunity of working with real normal people for quite a long time. I worked in a private practice for 13 years, and began to move into sport, partly because I loved sport and have always been interested in it, and also partly because a 27-year-old sports psychologist is a little more sort of acceptable than a 27-year-old counselling psychologist. So I gained some experience there. And that was, 13 years of practice in South Africa. And then, just through a fairly sort of random set of events, got offered a job here and took it. And
so it's a funny thing to be a sports psychologist, because it's not like you're dealing with secondary school children. You're dealing with people that are at the top of the game anyway.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. So you're dealing with people that sort of above the norm anyway, psychologically, to have got where they've got to.
Yes.
So what do you find, is there a general theme of what are the main problems tend to pop up? Is it like overworking? Is it something, what would you be called in for?
The overworking is a part of it.
Yeah.
Particularly in some sports.
Yeah.
So cricket, for example, is a very tough, mentally a very tough sport, because you're living in hotels so much of the time.
So the outskirts of the sport is
so some,
I suppose because it can last a month.
That's right.
Like a test match. Yeah.
Really, really tough. I mean, I went over and spent some time with one of the teams in the IPL in 2019, and you've got the strange thing on the one hand, any elite athlete is probably his family's hero.
Yeah.
So he's grown up and he's always been the star. Like when he was 5, he was the best, and 6 and 7 and all of that. And he's always been the hero. And then he's probably met his girlfriend or his wife, and he was the hero as well. And she's always looked up to him. And suddenly he's found himself away from home in a hotel for 6 weeks. His sleep cycle's gone out of sync because he's just indoors all the time and is not exposed to daylight. And he's suddenly feeling really down, and phones home, and they don't really understand it, because they think, well, you're supposed to be having a brilliant time.
Right.
So yes,
it's not actually about the sport. It's the psychology of the person who happens to be a sports person.
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's very specific. Oh, okay. So for example, you work with a golfer, and sometimes it's so specific that you're trying to teach an individual how to operate their own body.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the breathing thing. That we all know how to breathe. We all know how to work our own bodies. But when thoughts start to intrude, what happens then? And how do you manage that situation? Because under pressure, thoughts are going to start to intrude.
Yeah.
And so on the very kind of specific level, you're trying to teach somebody to operate their own body precisely and powerfully in the face of obtrusive thoughts.
Right.
And you're trying to teach people how to push those thoughts to one side and retain their full level of skill and talent and power. And then right on the other side, you may be having a conversation about fatigue or lifestyle or, relationships.
And is there a general few things that seem to pop up with people that are at the top of the game? Or is it always individual? It's always an individual
thing? They're common. You're saying they're
common,
like
something that's,
issues.
like I said, they tend to overwork, or they tend to overthink, or they tend to... Is there something generally that tends to pop up?
I remember watching the French tennis open, like when I was a teenager, and asking myself that question, what does it take to get to the very top?
Yeah.
And do you have to be like crazy in some way? Do you have to be obsessed and ruthless and, unkind? Or do you have to be a fairly well-rounded person? And it's the second. Generally these people are very resilient, well-rounded, extremely social, and extremely intelligent. And there's this kind of myth that athletes are the dumb jocks, but sport is a contest with another human being, and almost all sport is geared in a way that you're trying to outsmart somebody.
Like playing chess.
In a way, you know, there's always a tactical element to it.
That's terrible. My first thought was like playing video games online against another person.
Well, that too.
You know, it's with chess, of course. Yeah, it's just like because it's like that extra bit. You're not just playing against a computer. There's actually someone else over there shooting at you, and they're doing weird stuff. They're doing weird, erratic, and they're behaving, you know, in a non sort of logical way, possibly just to try and freak you. You know what I mean? They sort of.
But that is it. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's that weird human variable.
Yeah. I was listening to somebody who was talking about bodybuilders, and he's in his 70s now in the States, and he was saying, he said unless you're completely genetically gifted, and it's just going to happen anyway. He said you have to understand these bodybuilders. He said there's no off switch. They're the type of people you're up against. So unless you've got that, you know that there's no off switch inside you. You need to know there's something wrong with these people, because they will never get to where they're trying to get. So it's just relentless. It doesn't stop. They don't think about anything else. It's just all consuming. I said, unless you've got that, then there's no point, because that's the type of people you're up against. They're never going to get where they're getting. So they're constantly redlining, just go.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, I was talking to somebody a while ago about celebrity culture, talking about acting and things like that. You go, you got to understand some of these people, it's not ambition with some of these people. There's a sort of hollowness that they're trying to fill up. And you're up against people that will never be able to fill that hole. So that everything is absorbed by just go, fill the hole, work 20-hour days. I don't care, spend all my money, sod family, sod this. I'm just trying to be famous. So you're up against them. So if you're like half reasonable, you've got a problem, because these people are like, their whole life is obsessed with this thing that they're never going to get. They're never going to be able to fill that hole up. It wasn't, I'm ambitious. It's, there's something wrong with me, and I'm trying to fill that hole up with this thing that I'll never get to. So those people, you're up against those type of people. But I'm surprised you said with the sports thing. I thought it'd be the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you said no. When you're up against another human being, you're now thinking about what's happening, and I've got to react to that.
And I suppose some sports are not like that.
Yeah.
You know, not all sports are human intelligence against human intelligence, and I think some sports would lend themselves more to obsession.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, if you take track cycling, for example, if you're a sprinter who's just got to sprint 60 seconds, well, you know, even in track cycling, for example, you know, it eventually comes down to a person versus person, and then there is this intelligence element to it. But I think there are some sports like the endurance sports which lend themselves to that sort of obsessive
like
nature.
Marathon run or triathlons, you go, that's not like you're going out for a run or a swim. That's like
maybe sort of weightlifting is something compared to weightlifting, because that way it's just you versus the weight. You know what I mean? Yes. And other people can do it, but it's mostly on you to do the weight. You know, to do that action.
Well, this fellow was talking about the bodybuilding. He said it's because it's like body dysmorphia. That's all it is. No matter what they see, it's not good enough. So they have to be back there tomorrow, and they're never going to get there. And you're up against somebody that's got that mindset. You're just thinking, I want to get some money. You go, no, you're up people that got a mental condition. So they're just like relentless.
And in a way, you know, the celebrity culture could also be this sort of dysmorphia that you're continually underestimating how popular you are, or, you know, or who actually, you know, how popular you should be, or who cares about you.
Yeah.
So sure, you know, that thing can creep in, and I think that can, that is a corrosive effect of being famous and losing the connection to, you know, those people that actually know you and care about you. You know, for sure there is that. But I think in not all sports are like that. You know, I think a lot of sports are where actually you need to be healthy. You know, even if you're a marathon runner, you need to rest. You can't run yourself to death. So that rest requires, you know, you to calculate that and reflect on it and do it properly.
What would be? Is there a general thing that seems to be with footballers? Because it's not too bad. You're going home at the end of the day. You're not sort of like off. What would be the things that pop up with footballers that tend to be more than anything else?
Yeah.
You still can't. Oh, okay, right, okay.
Yeah, fair enough. No, but I think, I think it's interesting to see. I always think it's interesting to see on a pitch when a player makes a mistake, and that can lead to a goal. Like, say they, literally give the ball away in their, in their box or whatever, their own box, and then the opposition striker just knocks it in. And it's interesting to see how I always think it's really interesting to see how players react to that, because it's very easy to hide. And a lot of people still do that. A lot of people sort of, they pretend to sort of, they pretend to sort of be open and look, ask for the ball, but oh no, oops, I'm not really open. So they sort of hide a bit here and there. But then it's always impressive, like the striker who misses 10 really good chances and then buries the 11th. I think that's always really interesting. Yeah. Just to keep on going, even if they're having an absolutely
not to carry the burden
absolute
of what's
rubbish
gone wrong.
game and everything's bouncing off their shins and they're just flailing about. It's just to keep on going.
Do you ever do any sports?
No. I go for
esports. Anything online? Are you a fantastic online footballer?
I used to play a lot of Call of Duty like years ago, back in the day.
I'm not sure war is a sport, but
well,
not unless you're in America.
Yeah, well, I think so. Lots of countries probably. Yeah.
I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about, oh God, what was it? I can't remember what it was now, but they were saying why America's so good compared to everyone else, and they said it's sort of like the Romans. They said it's not just the hardware that we've got, which is obviously a big thing. They said it's like Rome. It's just we've got the money to relentlessly play games. Like we're basically going to war every day. All the planes are up. A lot of countries can't afford that. Yeah. But he said we're constantly doing that. He said because the thing is, what they've known is that you can't teach being able to fight in a battle. You can only, because he said no matter what you're taught, everything just goes to shit. So you can only teach people to react to not knowing what's going to happen, and you can only do that by just war games every day. Send the jets up, send the Navy against the SEALs, send that, and just he said that's where they become specialised because they can afford to do that all the time.
I just hope they don't show the government that footage of the the tractor dragging that Russian tank away sideways, because that might give some people ideas. I know where we should be investing in the future. Tractors.
Yeah, I'm not sure that made it onto Russian TV. That's what I was going to say. So the psychology, you started to do sports psychology. What led you on to the book? Is it personal experiences? Was it something in yourself that happened? What was it you noticed?
Yeah, it was actually, because as a psychologist, you get to have a lot of conversations, but you get to have them under extremely ideal circumstances, because you've got your own little office where you can sit. Nobody's going to disturb you. You know it's going to last exactly for an hour. So you don't particularly have to protect yourself too long. You know it's going to end. So you know you're going to be out of there. The person that you're talking to is a client. They're not a family member. So you're not desperately emotionally invested in the conversation. So you're able to hopefully maintain a degree of distance that gives you clarity. And also that person wants to be there because they're actually paying you money to be there. So they're
seeking help. So
yes, they've come, yes. And then you have a shared agenda. So while some of the conversations can seem to be quite complex or difficult, actually many of the circumstances are designed to make it an optimal situation to have a conversation in.
Right.
And in some ways, I had 13 years of those conversations. And if you'd said to me, are you good at conversations, same as are you good at breathing, I would have gone, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But then I moved into a wider organization where many of those sort of ideal circumstances fell away. And I realized that actually there were many deficits in my own ability.
Because you'd sort of had a flame put on your ideas of a conversation, and it suddenly showed up the holes of what
of what I couldn't do.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting for me to realize, actually, you're not really good at this, and you're not really good at this.
And can you remember what the initial sort of main problems were?
The main problem was, the first thing was understanding why people disagreed with me.
Right.
That was the main one, because my initial assumption is if somebody disagrees with me, first of all, they're probably wrong. That was it. And then worse than that, they're probably not just wrong. They're either wrong or limited in some way, that they couldn't have worked out exactly what I've worked out and came to the same correct conclusion as me, or they're even bad.
Yeah.
So that. And I remember it was a bit of a light bulb moment. And I was reading another book called Difficult Conversations. I went, wow, it's a much more interesting question. If you can eliminate the possibility of the person that you're disagreeing with being stupid or bad or misinformed even, how do you then explain disagreement without going to those very easy explanations?
Yeah.
And that for me, like personally, was kind of the beginning.
So you had to analyze yourself to move forward.
Well, partly myself, absolutely, and partly to accept my own capacity for bias or error or not being completely informed. And also, probably most importantly, my tendency to overestimate how correct I am.
Right.
That would be number one. And then the second thing would be to just start to understand the mechanics by which human beings come to conclusions.
Yeah.
And how much sort of wiggle room there is for you or I to be exposed to a situation and come to quite different conclusions, but both actually reasonably reaching those conclusions. So, that was quite an eye-opener for me.
There's a slight, it's not similar, it's exactly the same thing, but I was listening to Stephen Fry, and he was talking about the medical profession, and he said somebody he knew was been in the medical profession a long time. She said one of the best bits of advice that her tutor taught them was, he said, I want you to remember this throughout your medical career. He said, by the time you've finished your medical career, and so these are students, he said, half of everything you're going to be taught until then will be proved wrong. So listen to people that are telling you, because if enough people are saying something, even if it goes against your training, then maybe that's one of those things that you are wrong about, but we don't know it yet. And I thought, that's so interesting.
Well, this is the thing.
Just to make you listen to people.
Retraining and additional training is a constant thing. I sort of work for a nurses union, so that is a lot of, a big thing that we offer is training and assisting with sort of learning and development stuff. Yeah. So, because you do need to keep up. It's not one of these things of, yes, I've done all that. I've done my exams. They've got all that. So these are constantly evolving a field of study, isn't it? So,
And then to kind of, I think ultimately where that leads to, and if I was to say one thing about all of this, it would be this notion that there is a crisis in society about how we know things, the process of coming to know. And so many of these conversations, and, I was in Cape Town and just spending time with my family, and some of my family are vaccinated against COVID and some are not. And this is a complex situation, and I'm sure it's a common situation that in many families people have, this opinion or that opinion. And the difficulty is that all of us are moral people who believe in doing the right thing, want to protect our family members, want to be healthy, want to care for our kids, want to care for our parents. All of us want that. So none of us are doing what we're doing because we're going, I couldn't be bothered, I'll just take a chance. All of us are passionate and diligent and committed. But we are deriving our conclusions from different sources of information.
Yeah.
And the problem is not that some of us lack logic.
Yeah.
That's not the problem. We're all deriving correct conclusions from the information that we have.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, we've chosen different sources of information. And what we don't share in society at the moment is a mechanism by which we choose what information to trust or what information to listen to. That is the key problem with communication. And so many debates, like the one we almost started getting into of, is this whole sort of, racial thing, should we all just, be on a bus together and kind of, it's all okay? Or do we need to look at it in a different way? So much of that depends on how do we choose information? And what we don't have is we don't really have a sort of checklist. Well, how do you decide whether the information that you've got is?
Yes, no, very much true. So, and it's a thing with the internet. So we've never had as much access to information, much easy and quick access to as much information as you could ever possibly want, and it's never been as confusing or as all over the shop. All over the shop. There's not really, as you said, there's not really a sort of a grounded reality for society, a caused reality. There used to be a kind of common conception of, okay, we are, I don't know, this group, and we live here, and we mostly believe this, and we mostly kind of do this, and this is our thing, and this is our history, and this is what we kind of possibly want to do moving forwards. And that's gone.
And what that really was in some ways, and it was, we weren't even making a choice about it, but we trusted. We trusted certain institutions. So you read certain newspapers and you trusted that information, and you maybe listened to a religious authority and you trusted that information. You listened to a political authority and you trusted that information as well. And you never really made a choice about whether to trust them or not. You just did. And it's and the problem with having all of this information is that there's no ways that I can evaluate that kind of information. So, you ask me, I've been triple vaccinated, for example, and I trust the information that I've got. Do I have the expertise to genuinely read those scientific papers and evaluate whether or not a vaccine is the right thing to do? No ways. Yeah. I don't know how to do that, and I do not have the time. So
it ends up being, in a way, sort of faith again, in a way.
It is. Yeah. Yes. And so then what it is, it's a faith judgment. Yeah. So we have to get better at deciding who to trust. Yeah. It's almost taking a further step backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be an issue with a lot of people is that is critically evaluating. I always say that you should be critically evaluating everything that you read, especially online, because you just need to be thinking. I always tell this to all my family and all my friends that if you're reading something online, don't necessarily take it as fact. Always be mindful of where it's from and that the person reading it has an agenda, possibly. They have an angle or an agenda or...
Well, the thing that doesn't get spoken about enough, it's such a big monolithic thing right in front of you, is that even though we beat ourselves up for not understanding the other person, you go, but you have to remember that the big monster in front of you is the fact that there are big entities whose revenue is decided on keeping friction between people with the newspapers and everything. You go, don't forget, they're actively trying to create friction.
Part of Facebook's business model, the reason why they're one of the biggest companies in the world is because they create
engagement.
Yes. Engagement. They create antagonism as well.
That's engagement making you like. It's not like you're getting information. No, they're trying to separate you
through these polarizing opinions and these conflicts. That's how they profit. That's how because people you either love it and cheer it on, or you go and it's like pro wrestling. They're standing on there going, "This town smells like manure," and you go, ooh, I hate you, Undertaker. Ooh.
Yes.
That's what Trump did for 4 years, wasn't it? You know, he's like, "You bunch of hicks," and you're like,
Who was the? Do you remember the comedian that Jim? Who played Ace Ventura?
Oh, Jim Carrey. Yeah.
Jim Carrey.
Who was the comedian that he played? Do you remember? And he kept pretending he was going to die. Andy Kaufman.
He was a wrestler. Yeah, he did his pro wrestling. Yeah,
and he'd so he's this comedian that's like, I think he was mental, but he pretended to be a wrestler, but he'd only fight women, and women when they thought it was real, and he'd anyway. So there's one because
he's from Hollywood. Get away with it now.
No, he was from Hollywood. So when he went to wrestle in these Midwest towns, he'd be calling them hicks and I'm from Hollywood, and you people you're in, and he did this thing, and it's on their local news channel. He'd brought a bar of soap and he was teaching them how to use soap, but he said, don't forget the water because it's very important, just to round them up.
And just everyone just spit, the whole audience throwing things, tearing their hair out.
From Hollywood, brought some soap. Don't forget to use the water. Anyway,
but I think unfortunately we are on the sort of the early adopters of internet nonsense, and I always say we are sat in a cinema audience as that first image of the train rolls towards us, and we're all just running out the room screaming because we don't know what's real and what's not
it's
anymore.
The perfect model.
We haven't developed that thing, and we will. I mean, people know story structure, and the average person knows how a film works and how story structure works. Oh no, well, obviously the good guys are going to die half an hour in because the film is 2.5 hours long. So.
But human beings go through the same things. That, you know? So it's literally the Wild West. It's the internet. We've turned up. There's no rules, no laws. They're doing that bad thing. It's just another generation's going to have to go, right, there's things now you can do this. But with just the first gen, it's just messy. That's all it is.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's why I called the book 10 Rules for Talking, because it was saying that actually we need rules. We need some kind of shared understanding of how these things happen.
Yeah.
So, I had the kind of personal journey to an interest in this, but the other was the sense that this is a Wild West. And you got people who just flout rules or ignore rules or think that they can lie or, not use facts or, use select facts. But actually, if we're to have a successful game of tennis, we need to agree on what the rules are. And if we're to have a successful conversation, we also need to agree what the rules are. You cannot have a conversation unless you know what the rules are. And sometimes those are implicit, that we just kind of understand that. But on those rare occasions, but very important occasions where conversations start to break down, this is when we need to actually impose rules.
Yeah. So to end then, I've got to go out on a good note. So we've chastised human beings. The elephant sounded the best.
Well, they were killing the parrots.
No, I mean, I think the elephants are the nicest ones. I've basically going off.
I'll pick up on that. No, I actually think it is topical. And, and that is a story about the tragedy of not recognizing how essential society is to elephants.
Yeah.
They are social creatures and they cannot exist in isolation.
Yeah.
And they cannot exist without tradition. And they cannot exist without the accumulated knowledge of generations.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're also social creatures.
Yeah.
We cannot exist alone. And we cannot exist without shared knowledge.
Yeah.
We can't just make stuff up as we go along. And that's what those little baby elephants are trying to do.
Yeah.
They're just making it up as they go along. Yeah. And so often we find ourselves in these fragmented little sections of society all by ourselves, and we try to make it up. And that doesn't work. We're social creatures. Yeah. We need each other. And that's an optimistic thing, because everything that we love about, everything that warms your heart are connections.
Yeah.
Human beings, and it's not an accident. If you're an eagle that is completely antisocial, you would not be warmed by pictures of people hugging each other at airports. You would be warmed by other things. But, we think these things are good because we are social creatures. We cannot deny that. It's essential to us.
It's a weird, I think I've said this before, but so I had a bit of a weird life when I was doing security and things like that. I just went off on my own, did like 15 years security. And there was a moment, it was like a week, where I always felt like it wasn't a depression like that. It's like I felt unwell and I didn't know what it was, like a bit annoyed. If you've eaten badly or you haven't been to the toilet on a regular basis, there's a minor stress that had built up on me for years, because I'd left home. I'm sorry, I'm saying this is dodgy. I'd left home, run away from home, lived in the streets, lived in cars. I was like a lone ranger, just going around, whatever. And I just always felt like off, like something was off. And something had happened, and I had a fight, and another fight in the club, blah, blah, blah. And the next day, I remember feeling a little bit better. And like my maturity had suddenly kicked in, and I'd suddenly see, I thought, I haven't touched anybody for about 4 years. And I thought, I think I'm getting pleasure from the fights. Because I remember when I grabbed that bloke, and he grabbed me, that was almost like a sadomasochism thing. Like it released something because it's a proper fight. And I might have been adding things up, but I thought, when was the last time I hugged anybody? I can't remember. I went back and was like, for 4 years, no, I haven't touched anybody. And that was I thought, oh, wow, that must be a thing. Like I haven't touched anybody. I know they did do studies with Russian children where they didn't hug them. They specifically kept them away from any hugs. Somebody for the magazine wrote an article about it, and they went off in all different weird directions about psychologically, because they were actually brought up without hugging or touching them. They were told not to touch these kids, and they did start to have all these mental things. So yeah, like saying us and the elephants, and that was just my experience of like we're held in place by things we can't see.
Yes,
and that was like that was one of the big things in my life. I remember thinking, wow, I'm just not being touched, and I didn't care. But it still forced its way even to me.
So I mean, it's there. You might not realise it, but there's something. Because
we've grown up as a society, so you're glued in.
That's what I'm saying. There's things going on.
And if I can just repeat that sentence, we're held in place by things we can't see.
Yeah,
it's a very powerful sentence.
I will end on this, but the it was a podcast years ago, and it's a psychologist, and he was talking about the problem with cosmetic surgery and how it affects other people, which then affects you. And he had likened it, and I said this on the podcast years ago, it was they said it changes your the minor muscles in your face that you can't see.
Yeah.
And the other person you speak to now is picking up on that, but they don't know they're picking up on it. It then changes how they act to you. You then think there's a problem, but you don't know you're picking up on it, so you get more thing. So, and she said it's like this, and this is what I thought. Oh wow. She said, if I was to talk to your friend, and I'm talking to you, and I want to tell you something bad, I've been abused or something, I was sexually abused. She said, imagine if I told you that, but the other person had sunglasses on, so you're not getting. You're not noticing the pupil changing. How often are they blinking? But your body is, because it's had thousands of years to process that.
Yeah.
So if a friend, you wouldn't tell that to a friend who was wearing sunglasses. You'd say, I can't talk to you unless you take the glasses off. He said, but that's what cosmetic surgery is doing. Yeah. It's not allowing the normal reaction of what's going on in your face that you can't see that makes that thing happen. So again, it's, as you said, the things we can't see. We still got to go, we're animals, we have grown up in this sense. And when you remove that, it throws things off. Back to the babies, like that's a perfect point of the baby elephants. They start to act rogue because they haven't grown up in the environment that they're used to.
Yes.
So I'm glad you said that about the babies. I think even there you go. It's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Start skipping school, start smoking fags around the back. Yeah.
And beating up rhinos.
Get in trouble. Yeah.
And what we do have as human beings is we have this ability to reflect and be conscious.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the 10 rules for talking is, look, we operate instinctively and naturally most of the time, and most of the time it gets us by, and that's fine. But every now and again, we must remember that we also have this kind of human superpower of reflection. And
do you want to say something?
No, I was going to say.
I was going to say, so going right back to the beginning, that when I said that one of the things I thought I wouldn't have need to have known about breathing and talk, I mean, there's not much more base things than that.
Yeah.
You actually have to go, no, there's things that you have to auto-correct because the world isn't perfect and you need to pull back towards that. So you should buy the book.
Yes.
It's is it you reading it online?
It is, yes.
It breaks my heart when everyone does the work and they do all the work, the writing, they sit there and they don't read the bloody thing. And the worst one, who was so bad, I actually gave him a pass, was Schwarzenegger. Because when you listen to the trailer on iTunes, he's speaking, right? I thought, that's strange. He's worth, hundreds of millions. He hasn't got time, because it's time. How much money is this worth to me? And I thought, okay, I'll give him his dues. I've always liked him.
And he read it?
He read it.
Okay.
Until you downloaded the book.
Oh, really?
He read the first and last chapter. It was so cheeky. I thought...
Just for the trailer as well.
I thought it was random, were they? But no, they must pick. You must be able to pick which 10 seconds you can listen or minute you can listen to. Yeah. But it was so cheeky. I thought, you know what? You done me because you got me. But it doesn't work. His accent's so him. I know,
it's so distinctive.
It's off. It doesn't work.
And anyway, cellular level.
Yeah. Anyway, so listen, thank you very much. How long did it take to get here? An hour and 10 minutes or whatever? 20 minutes? Oh, God, there you go. Dedication.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Here's your story. Let's begin. The world is fine. Come on, dive in. The future's here. It's right before your eyes. Step by step, you're on your way. You're welcome to a brighter day. Don't you know it feels good to be alive? You could be larger than life.